I rounded the corner of the parking lot, coffee steaming in my hand, already bracing myself for a long day of meetings, spreadsheets, and client calls. The morning sun was sharp against the asphalt, glinting off the rows of cars like it was cheering me on, or mocking me. My eyes went straight to my spot, the one with my name painted in crisp white letters, Jillian Harper, my spot. My little claim in this chaotic city of concrete and metal. But someone had already taken it. A black luxury SUV gleamed arrogantly where my name should have been. Its chrome grille caught the sunlight like a crown. I froze for a moment, letting the hot coffee warm my fingers as I tried to process it. The window rolled down, and the driver, a woman sharply dressed in a tailored suit, sunglasses perched on her nose, hair coiffed perfectly, leaned toward me. Her voice cut through the morning quiet, honeyed but sharp. "Sweetheart, people like you park on the street," she said, like she had invented the rules of the world and I was simply a mistake for existing. I blinked, the cup trembling slightly in my grip, and stared at her. People like me, what did that even mean? Who decided what people like me deserved? A surge of heat rose in my chest, a mixture of shock, indignation, and disbelief. My hand tightened around the coffee cup. For a second, I considered yelling, slamming my fist on the hood, shaking her until she understood that I was not invisible, that I was not to be dismissed. But I didn't. Instead, I forced myself to take a deep breath and let the anger simmer beneath the surface. Years of being overlooked, underestimated, dismissed for speaking up. All the times I had been polite, quiet, reasonable, flashed through my mind. Each memory sharpened the sting of this moment. This was trivial in the grand scheme, a parking spot, a luxury SUV. But it was symbolic. It was the arrogance of someone who assumed she was untouchable. Untouchable in her privilege, untouchable in her disregard for other people. And I was done letting it slide. I fished my phone out of my bag, pretending to scroll casually. One discreet photo of the license plate, enough to ensure I had a record. I gave a quick wave to the security guard lounging nearby, who lifted an eyebrow but said nothing. I reported the violation with the clipped efficiency of someone who had done their research, knew the rules, and had every right to enforce them. The woman's gaze followed me, her lips tightening into a smirk. She drove off slowly, deliberately, like she owned not just the space, but the air around it. My fingers lingered on the edge of the phone as I watched her disappear. I walked toward the building, boots clicking against concrete, trying to shake the heat in my chest. But it wouldn't leave me. Colleagues whispered as I passed. Casual remarks, eyes flicking toward the black SUV parked arrogantly in the lot. "That's her again," one murmured. "She always gets whatever she wants." I clenched my jaw. Every word landed like a challenge. The untouchable aura surrounding this woman made my pulse quicken. My name, Jillian Harper, painted in white on asphalt, had been defied. It was more than a parking spot. It was a declaration, and she had erased it without even thinking twice. My mind raced, weighing the options, calculating how to reclaim control without making myself look foolish. Pride burned hot in my chest, and determination pressed behind my ribs like a fist waiting to strike. This wasn't just about a car. It wasn't just about a morning disrupted. It was about a pattern, about the way people assumed they could walk over me, over anyone like me, and get away with it. I straightened my shoulders and kept walking, leaving the empty space behind me, but the tension didn't leave. Every step echoed a promise to myself. She had no idea what was coming. And when it did, everyone, including her, would see exactly who Jillian Harper really was. I turned the corner into the lobby, head high, heart hammering with anticipation. The coffee burned my throat as I paced the small kitchen of my apartment, frustration bubbling like a pot on the stove. My mind kept returning to the black SUV, parked arrogantly in my spot, the license plate a flashing insult. I tried to reason with myself this morning, telling myself it was trivial, that it wasn't worth losing my calm over a car and a woman with more money than sense. But rationality had failed within seconds of her words cutting through the air. "People like you park on the street." "People like me," the phrase kept repeating, sharper each time I thought it. I was Jillian Harper, and I had every right to be furious. I opened my laptop and started poring over the building's parking policies, scanning the rules for any loopholes. Towing regulations, security procedures, notice requirements. All of it mattered. My coffee grew cold in its mug as I plotted, step by meticulous step, how to reclaim what was mine. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was deliberate. I remembered all the times I had let others walk over me, the quiet compliance that had made me invisible, underestimated. For once, I refused to let that define me. This was not about the coffee or the asphalt. This was about respect. This was about demonstrating that I would not be dismissed. Not quietly, not ever again. By mid-morning, I had begun collecting evidence. Photos of the SUV blocking my spot over consecutive days, timestamps from security cameras, statements from neighbors who had witnessed her arrogance, even small notes from employees who muttered about her entitlement. Each piece felt like a brick in the foundation of something I was constructing carefully, methodically, a plan that would leave no room for escape or excuses. I took screenshots, cataloged the angles, and documented the license plate. Every detail mattered, because her arrogance was only as untouchable as I allowed it to be. I walked into the building office, trying to appear casual as I explained the situation to the manager. "She's a client," she said, shrugging with a practiced air of indifference. "She always gets preferential treatment." My jaw clenched. That word, preferential, had always protected people like her, shielded them from consequences, while the rest of us followed the rules. But not today. Today, the pattern ended. I left her office with polite nods, but my mind already running through the steps that would make her regret ever parking there. Late afternoon, I watched the SUV glide back into the lot, driver sliding into her seat like she owned everything around her. My hands shook slightly as I dialed the towing company and scheduled a pickup for the next morning, the tone in my voice calm, professional, unyielding. I told myself repeatedly that this wasn't vindictive, it was justice. Yet my pulse betrayed how much I was invested, how personal this had become. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the culmination of every slight I had endured and ignored for years, finally transformed into calculated action. I stood in the lot for a moment longer, watching the vehicle that had so boldly defied me. I imagined her shock when she realized the rules applied to her too. The thought tightened something inside me, a mix of exhilaration and anticipation, a promise that the next 24 hours would tip the balance in my favor. This wasn't just parking, this was a statement. And I was ready. I arrived at the parking lot before anyone else, coffee clutched tightly in my hand, eyes scanning every row of cars like a hawk tracking prey. The black SUV sat where it shouldn't, glossy and arrogant under the morning sun, its chrome grille reflecting the first light of day as if daring me to act. I watched her approach from a distance, latte balanced in one hand, phone pressed against her ear, speaking in clipped, confident tones that suggested she controlled not only the conversation, but the entire world. Every casual flick of her wrist, every tilt of her head, grated against something deep inside me. I remembered times I had stayed quiet, swallowed my indignation, let others push me aside for fear of confrontation or social reprisal. I remembered the meetings where I had the best ideas but never spoke up, the moments when I had deferred to someone else's arrogance to avoid rocking the boat. And now, standing in the lot, watching her strut toward my spot, I realized how small grievances could ignite years of pent-up frustration. A parking space, a latte, a dismissive sneer, and yet it was enough to awaken something I had buried for far too long. I took a slow sip of coffee, trying to steady my racing pulse, and went over the plan one last time. The security guard had been briefed, the tow truck driver had my instructions, and the paperwork was in order. I moved through the lot with casual confidence, greeting neighbors and tenants as if nothing were happening, but inside, my adrenaline thrummed like an electric current. Each step toward the awaiting SUV tightened the coil of anticipation in my chest. The world around me blurred. Only her, the car, and the looming sense of accountability mattered. She looked up at the approaching truck and waved her hand dismissively, a smile tugging at her lips. "Sweetheart, relax, they'll figure it out," she called, her voice carrying that same patronizing cadence from yesterday. I pressed my lips together and forced a measured breath. letting the hubris in her tone fuel my determination. Her confidence only made the moment inevitable. The tow truck was a threat she hadn't calculated, a reality she hadn't imagined, and soon she would have to. The truck came closer, metal rumbling over asphalt, and I felt my pulse quicken. She gestured, trying to summon someone on her phone, but the crowd of early arrivals had begun to notice, some stopping to stare, whispers rising like a tide around us. The tow driver paused for a fraction of a second, reading the signed notices I had prepared so meticulously. She argued, waving documents and threats, but I kept my composure, silent and unyielding. Every second felt like a test. Would justice arrive fully, or would her connections, her money, her status, shield her from consequence? I couldn't allow that to happen. The moment stretched, taut and electric, my heart hammering with anticipation and satisfaction. I imagined the disbelief that would cross her face when she realized she was not above the rules, that no amount of privilege could protect her from accountability this time. Her arrogance had led her straight into this. She had no idea what was coming. And in that stretch of suspended time, waiting for the first movement of the tow truck to break the spell, I felt the weight of every insult, every dismissal, every moment I had been overlooked in life settle into a sharp, intoxicating clarity. She thought she was untouchable. She had no idea. The tow truck's engine rumbled to life, metal grinding against asphalt, and I felt a pulse of exhilaration that nearly made me drop my coffee. The woman in the black SUV was on her phone, frantically barking orders to someone who wasn't there yet, her gestures wild and desperate. Her assistant, I imagined, was miles away, and security hovered indecisively nearby, caught between protocol and the temper of a wealthy client. But none of it mattered. The paperwork I had prepared, every permit, notice, and signature, was flawless. She was about to discover that privilege could only protect her so far. I stood off to the side, careful to appear casual, but inside, every nerve was electric. Years of being overlooked, of politely stepping aside while others took credit, condensed into this single, radiant moment of satisfaction. I watched the tow operator hook the SUV with calm precision, my hands steady, my voice quiet, but authoritative as I guided security and the driver through the steps. It was almost surreal, the scene unfolding like a slow-motion victory I had been imagining for days. Her reaction came instantly, an explosion of outrage and disbelief. She screamed, waved her arms, and threatened lawsuits, calling me every name she could think of. I didn't flinch. Her words collided with the immovable wall of law, evidence, and preparation I had built. Whispers began to ripple through the small crowd gathering nearby. The people who had never spoken up before were leaning forward, watching her carefully curated image of untouchable power begin to unravel in real time. Pride, arrogance, and entitlement slipped from her shoulders like a costume she could no longer wear. As the tow truck began to pull her SUV forward, the crowd's murmurs grew louder. Phones emerged from pockets, flashes of cameras capturing the spectacle. Her face flushed a deep crimson, lips pressed into a tight line, as she realized that not only had she lost the space, she was losing control of the narrative entirely. I felt a thrill of vindication, a sharp satisfaction that made the tension in my chest dissolve in a slow, exultant release. I had planned, prepared, and executed a simple act of justice, and yet it felt monumental. This was more than a parking space. This was reclaiming the power that had been ignored, denied, and dismissed for far too long. Even as the SUV disappeared down the lot, her retreating figure seething with anger, I could feel the edges of the victory sharpening in my mind. She had lost the immediate battle, the public humiliation had been delivered, and yet a part of me knew this was not the final act. I had dismantled her confidence, shattered her appearance of invincibility, but the complete destruction, the total collapse of her aura, the erasure of her untouchable status, still lay ahead. That knowledge hummed beneath my satisfaction, a quiet promise that what came next would be even more decisive, even more satisfying. I watched her leave, the crowd dispersing, the tow truck rumbling back toward its lot, and I smiled. This was only the beginning. She thought she could intimidate me. She was wrong. Weeks later, the news hit the building's community forum like a hammer. Reports surfaced detailing repeated privilege violations, fines levied for improper parking, and complaints that spanned months. Social media posts circulated, screenshots of heated interactions, recordings of confrontations, even video clips of her tantrums in the lot. Her polished facade of untouchable elegance crumbled in real time, and there was no one to defend her. No ally stepped forward, no sympathetic words offered. Every carefully constructed illusion of invulnerability collapsed under the weight of evidence I had quietly collected and presented with precision. I watched from my rightful place, coffee in hand, heart steady and mind calm, knowing that the planning, the patience, the small but relentless steps I had taken were what had brought this to fruition. I felt a sense of release I hadn't anticipated. For weeks I had carried the lingering heat of frustration, the kind that makes you replay moments over and over in your mind, wondering if there was something more you could have done, something more immediate you could have acted on. And yet now, as her reputation disintegrated before the eyes of her peers and the wider community, I realized it had been worth the wait. Satisfaction was not instantaneous. It was measured, it was deliberate, it was earned. The fear, the anger, the quiet humiliation of feeling invisible when she had swaggered into my space. All of it had been transformed into this moment of absolute clarity. She no longer mattered. Her threats, her sneers, her arrogance, they were irrelevant. The narrative tension that had gripped me for weeks, the pulse-quickening anticipation of confrontation, collapsed into a serene, almost meditative contentment. I sipped my coffee and let the morning sun warm my face as I settled into the chair by the lot. This was more than a parking space, more than a black SUV or a dismissive insult. It was a symbol of something larger, a small but crucial victory in reclaiming the right to be seen and respected. I reflected on the patterns I had witnessed countless times in life: betrayal, arrogance, entitlement, the assumption that power can insulate you from consequence. People push boundaries until someone stands firm, until one person says, enough. I had been that person. I had finally said enough. The ripples of standing up for myself had extended far beyond the immediate dispute. Others who had endured her haughty disregard began to speak up, emboldened by her fall. Observing the consequences for someone who assumed they were untouchable reminded me that everyone has limits, and that recognition, respect, and justice are not granted automatically. They are claimed. I leaned back, taking a long sip of coffee, and felt the stillness of a story concluded. There were no loose ends, no unfinished business, no chance for her to strike back. She was gone from my life, and I was fully, completely present in mine. Justice, I realized, is rarely instantaneous. Sometimes it comes quietly, patiently, in the wake of careful planning and unwavering resolve. And when it arrives, the satisfaction is not just in the outcome. It is in the recognition that even the smallest act of courage can cascade far beyond expectations. Everyone deserves to be seen. Everyone deserves to have their boundaries respected. And everyone has the power to ensure that those who overstep are held accountable. I smiled, watching the empty space where my name gleamed in crisp white letters. It was finally mine.